How Crackshot Came to Be by Justin Davenport, aka me. I'm not your average stallion. I was born a Pegasus into a poor family about the same time my good friends were. The same five mares who represent five of the six elements of harmony. Starving, thirsty, homeless, and fatherless. I was first forced to find work as a little foal. In my free time, I like to practice shooting my arrows from my bow, something my father had made for me before he died. I was firing my arrows at a target I had set up using an old bucket hung on a tree when I saw a sonic rain boom, followed by my little brother, Hotshot, screaming. I turned to the noise and saw him struggling to break free from the grasp of a changeling. Thinking on my hooves, I fired an arrow at the bony creature's head as it lifted into the air, bow still in my hooves from when I was practicing. The arrow flew true, spattering dark green blood into my brother's fur. I yelled at the top of my lungs, "Mom!" as I ran to catch my little brother. A sparkling effect appeared on both my flanks as a black and silver L-shaped object appeared where the sparkles were just a moment ago. If it were not for the flash and bang of those seven colors, the changeling would not have awoken, nor would I have discovered my special talent for hitting my targets exactly where I want so perfectly every time. My mother, Heartshot, ran out to see what the commotion was about, saw the dead changeling, which still had my arrow protruding out of its fanged head, saw my brother's fur stained with the love parasite's blood, gasped loudly, and exclaimed, "What happened?" I simply stood there, paralyzed by my own act of violence. The next day I set out to see what I could find out about my new Huey mark. I never liked the word as it sounded childish, something I hadn't had the pleasure to be in what seemed like an eternity. I entered a bookstore and discovered a book called The Book of Humans. I had never heard of such a creature in all my life, but then again, no pony has ever seen a cutie mark such as mine in their lifetimes. I opened the book and flipped through a few pages before the store clerk came over to me and said in a low, slow tone before jerking his head at a sign in the store, "This isn't a library. If you're gonna read that book, you gotta buy it first. See the sign?" I looked up and saw a sign that read, "Books are to be bought before being read." I replied, "Yes, I see the sign," and put the book back with a long face, realizing that I could not buy such an expensive item, the price being 1,000 bits. The clerk then said, "Thank you," and walked to the storage room. I realized that such a rare book would probably be nearly impossible to find anywhere else, and without thinking, I quickly looked around for any pony who might be watching, stowed the same book I was holding away in my saddlebag, and calmly trotted out of the store. As soon as I was out of sight of the place, I galloped straight home, went inside my door, closed my shades, lit a small lamp, and opened my book. I quickly and quietly looked through the pages for anything resembling my mark. I found a gun that looks much like my cutie mark. The page read, "This is one of the human's many weapons, called guns. This one in particular is a pistol with the strength of millions of arrows, and is capable of dealing heavy damage. When fired, it hurls a lead object called a bullet at unthinkable speeds at its target, capable of leaving holes, igniting oil, taking lives, shattering glass, and puncturing some of the toughest armor known to us. Pistols can be customized with scopes which are much like our telescopes, flashlights which shine light in a particular direction, and laser pointers which project a thin beam of light, creating a dot on whatever it points at." The following day, I realized my new ability and its potential in the job market, the criminal job market. This was also my birthday, and that marked my young adult years, meaning I could get a real job. or his job as a hitman. I chose the latter and kept it a secret for my family, imagining all the bits I could raise for my family. And so began a fruitful and rewarding, yet violent and wrong career of murdering. My first assignment was to provide cover fire for a trio of thieves robbing a small bank. I had a much better bow at that time that I stole, as well as better arrows that I had fletched myself. It was night, so we worried not about any citizens who might have been in the bank if it were still open. I silently and swiftly took out 2 sleeping guards at the door, followed by 5 more guards inside, collecting my arrows as I went. The former locksmith picked the lock with a successful click as it was unlocked. Quickly and quietly was how we looted the walking safe just before we made our escape. The mission was a success and I got my cut. 4,000 bits, exactly 1/4 of the total amount. My next mission was similarly easy, followed by numerous more missions. This continued until the day a gang called the Contesters hired me to steal from their rival gang, the Wolves. The target assets were a large sum of money, weapons, and women. The Wolves knew that their rivals were scheming against them for a while now and suspected that dark gray stallion entering a likely building was also the one who had raided them the night after the sighting. This stallion just so happened to be me, the one who was hired by the Contesters, the one who had killed so many and spared none. At this, the wolves sought revenge and as they searched for me, eventually finding a lead on my residence. This gang spared no time before barging into my new home, killing my mother and raping my little brother. They would have killed me if it weren't for the fact that I wasn't home. I came home from a restaurant when I found Heartshot dead, my brother covered in a white, sticky substance, and a note stuck to my wall by means of an arrow. The note told me to come alone to an abandoned warehouse where I got my sweet revenge later that night. I washed Hotshot and told him, "Stay here. I'll be home before you have to leave for school in the morning." I was wearing my tail in its usual scythe-shaped trio, and my mane in a similarly jagged fashion, both of them naturally colored black and a shade of crimson like the blood of my targets. I bore my custom-made knife with a dark red handle and a black blade. My fur was its usual dark gray, but was covered by my black coverall, which only showed my long face. I grabbed my bow and slung my quiver full of arrows over my shoulder and left. On my way to the place depicted by the note, I said, maybe being a hitman isn't the best thing for my family. I should change my profession so that my brother lives to see his kids. Or should I just quit life to meet my mom? But what would become of my little brother? How would he provide for himself? I was thinking out loud because I didn't give a fuck about who heard me, for I had died inside that murderous day. I soon arrived at the building, taking position in a nearby tree. I flashed back to when I first became a hitman, firing arrows into the 2 guards. I repeated the process with the 4 hired thugs who were guarding the doors moments ago, something I might have had trouble doing in the past. The doors were locked, but not to my dismay, for I was able to pick it rather easily. I opened a door just wide enough to fit an arrow through, and peeked in. What I saw would haunt me forever. A gagged mare tied to a chair, who was about to be eaten alive after her mother suffered the same demise. "I wonder if she tastes just like chicken," said one cannibal, grabbing her foreleg. Thinking on my hooves just as I did when I encountered snags in my assignments, I shot the ravenous psycho in his temple so hard it looked like he was wearing one of those fake arrow through the head props. Just before any of the other assailants could respond, I put them down like wild dogs. The gagged mare let out a confused muffle as I looked for more targets. I saw none, but heard a shout booming from overhead of the carnage, exclaiming, "Who dare has disturbed my execution! Guards! Check those fucking doors! I couldn't just run or hide and let this poor soul die or lost me in vain. Not when I could deal my brand of justice. Not when there was sweet, sweet revenge to be had. Not when I could redeem myself. The headfin darted through the shadows, and before I knew it, they were almost to the door. I had no more time to pick them off as I was used to, but fortunately I had planned for such an occasion. I pulled out my knife that I had put so much money into and readied myself. These are the bastards who slaughtered my mother and stole my brother's innocence. I'll make them pay. Make them all pay, I thought to myself. The stallion saw that the doors had been cracked open and shoved the doors open to reveal 4 dead guards, but nothing else. Well? Asked the same voice impatiently. What do you see? There's 4 dead guards, but no pony is here any. The hired thug was cut short by a swift stroke of my knife along his throat, as I leapt out from behind the wall and brought down my knife on the next pony's head. The last 3 intruders swore and swiped at me. I furiously dodged all the attacks and jumped only to be grazed by an arrow across my side. I quickly fired an arrow into the archer's face and landed behind the trio of now turned assailants and got slashed on my left bicep. With my left front leg now disabled, I rolled onto my back and bucked the criminals as hard as I could, all in their snouts, knocking them out and shattering their muzzles with loud cracks each time. The loud, booming voice returned and roared from above. Send in more guards! I don't want this bastard getting away again! I was soon outnumbered for the last time in my life, or so I thought. I shot down as many as I could, but there were too many and I was badly wounded. One of the thugs managed to grab my front leg that wasn't slashed, but I flipped and slammed him into the ground. I suddenly felt a strange sensation in my wound and turned to face a threat, thinking that I was being attacked. It was then that I saw a pink glow reversing the damage on my bicep as the process repeated on my side as well. Now fully healed, I was ready for anything. The ponies charged at me all at once. I spun my knife and said, time to end this. I stabbed the first one in the heart, just barely missing his ribs, followed by a slash to the neck of the second as blood sprayed from the wounds and flicked from my knife. I tossed my knife in the air and kicked it into another thug's head before I jumped over and shot arrows into 4 more and retrieved my knife after landing. Another one fell as I slashed his stomach, releasing his entrails from their fleshy prison. This was for you! This was for my mother, you shit! As I shouted as the bloody blade of my knife sunk into the arch of a particularly buff crook's back. The last standing pony brought down his hammer into the floor where I had been standing just before. I swept my hind leg under him and slammed my blade into his abdomen, causing him to bleed out rather slowly. The stallion with the large voice finally revealed himself and said with a surprisingly calm voice, I'm impressed. No pony has that. I cut him off with an arrow that flew clean through his voice box, snapping his neck with the great momentum caused by my even greater strength. I had to step over numerous bodies to reach the mare who was now passed out from seeing so much carnage and gore. The following morning was a normal morning, or as close to normal as my mornings were going to get. The difference between your mornings and this one was that I had a house guest who was deeply depressed, a little brother whose soul was so deeply scarred by his experiences, and that there was no parent to be seen. Hotshot, would you go eat your breakfast while us big ponies talk? I asked my little brother, to which I got a grumble, followed by what I could have sworn was something about him being a big pony as he went off to eat. I brought the mare from last night some oatmeal. Yes, please," she muttered, with a trembling tongue. She took a deep breath and stated in an even clearer voice, "I was the one who healed you back there before I fainted. Thank you for rescuing me," I replied. "You're welcome." I paused before continuing. "I'm sorry for your loss." She levitated a spoonful of porridge into her mouth using her horn and swallowed before stating, "Don't be. I know she was my mom, but you didn't know about her until it was too late."